AcuFocus is committed to continuously adapting and expanding our small aperture technology. That's why we're here and that's what we do. We've proven reliable technologies, straightforward surgical techniques, excellent outcomes, continuous support training for the surgeon, and a high level of patient satisfaction. Now, the KAMRA inlay was approved on April 17th of this year, and we've begun our slow and methodical rollout of the product, and it's actually doing unbelievably well. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit. But the other thing that we have in our latest development is our IC8 intraocular small aperture intraocular lens, which we have extensive clinical data on, nearing about 200 patients to date, and this product does have CE mark, and we're continuing development on this product as well. The IC8 small aperture IOL basically is a standard single piece hydrophobic acrylic IOL with the mask placed within the IOL. And the mask has been sized appropriately to go from the corneal plane to the IOL plane. And this now, as I mentioned, has been in clinical studies. We currently have one ongoing right now in Europe with 12 sites. And it's been found to be just really good results, easy to implant, and it's working really well. Now, what I'd like to do here, this is data that what I'd like you to look is primarily on the upper line, and these are Air Force targets with image resolution. And what we're seeing here is that we see a very broad degree of image resolution. And what's interesting is from the plano side, we get the same type of image resolution from the myopia side to the hyperopic side. So it's very broad and very wide. And what small aperture optics allow us to do is to be able to have this great image quality. And here what we see are MTF curves that help to explain the reason why. The real magic of small aperture optics is the fact that there's no out of focus image on which an in-focus image is laid over. So therefore, the image quality is good, and we're going to take a look at that. Now, typically with multifocal type IOLs, there's an out-of-focus image, and on top of that is an in-focus image, and it does two things. One is it decreases the image quality, and the other thing is that it contributes to decrease in contrast sensitivity, as well as the possibility of dysphotopsias, particularly at night. But if we take a look at this novel way of approaching presbyopia correcting IOLs, with one eye having a monofocal IOL with great image quality, the other eye having the IC8, now what we have is this expanded depth of focus that's very tolerant to refractive error, both sphere and CIL, as we're going to see in just a little bit. That again gives very high image quality across the board, and the results have really been changing the whole approach to presbyopia correction. This is the defocus curve that we have, and in blue is at plano, and we see that it's actually very broad, and in green is if it's adjusted by 3/4 of a diopter. Now we're able to do that again because of the wide or the breadth of the defocus curve, and we can do it without appreciably affecting distance visual acuity and in significantly increasing near. So if we take a look at what happens in terms of the depth of focus, we see that we have about a 3 diopter range at 2032, which is really good, and again, it's very clear and good image quality. The data that we have with the IOL, we're showing that we have about 20/20 at the distance, we have 20/20 intermediate, and we're getting a little better than 20/32 across the range at near, and this is at 40 centimeters. Now, one of the things that I mentioned that I think is really important to highlight is a lot of times with multifocal optics, a small amount of ametropia decreases image quality. With small aperture optics, this isn't really the case, and what happens here is what this graph is showing is that this is the change, and we can get up to a diopter and a half and have less than a line, a diopter and a half of cylinder, and have less than a line of defocus. So again, if the surgeon misses the refractive endpoint, it's very tolerant to both sphere and to CIL. So these data show what happens when we do this targeted correction in the IC8 eye, and we go for about a minus 0.75. You can see that we increase by about 10% the amount of patients who are able to achieve 20/25 at 40 centimeters at near without any appreciable loss of distance acuity at 20/20 at far. Now, so the other question then is what happens with contrast sensitivity with small aperture optics? We know that there's a slight loss, about 0.1 to 0.2 log, from a monofocal to the small aperture optics. But with both eyes, as we see in green, there's no loss at all, and patients do not report any issues relative to contrast sensitivity, both with and without glare mesopic. Another question then is what happens relative to the surgical technique, and it's standard. We like to place it in a 6/12 orientation. It helps centration and seems to work great. Now, the other question then is for posterior segment types, both from a diagnostic point of view and a surgical point of view. We've been able to do visual field, fundus photography, retinal OCT. All diagnostic tests that we've done have been without issue. We've also done a lot of surgical techniques, including epiretinal membrane peels, laser photocoagulation, as well as other types of retinal procedures, and again, no issues. So that's one of the questions that people have. So in summary, the small aperture design extends depth of focus, and again, it does it without creating any out-of-focus image on the retina. The post-market study on IC8 is demonstrating really excellent visual acuity and very happy patients in an approach that's really different than most have done before, so it's working out really well. The ocular assessments and the procedures are also working really well in terms of post-implantation. Thank you.